Welcome into episode 241 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. Sources Say is, as always, presented by our good friends at Justice Dental. Visit one of their two Lexington locations. That's on Blazer Parkway and Wellington Way by scheduling an appointment online at justicedental.com or by calling 859-543-0700. You can even send a text message to one of their friendly team members at the same number to ask a question or make an appointment. Now is a great time to schedule your dental cleaning. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Justice, and their team strive to provide you with good oral health and a comfortable environment. The Justice Dental team looks forward to seeing you soon. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very happy to be joined once again by the one and only Shawn Smith of Go Big Blue Country. Shawn, how the heck are you?
I am fantastic, Jack Pilgrim, but the one thing that I noticed, I've got to get a background for this. You're showing me up with the backdrop you've got there, and I've got the corner of my apartment. So I've got to do something about that.
So this is a Dr. Mike special. So we just moved into this new house, and I specifically, because he has this absolute monster of a printer where he can print his professional photos. Like, he took this picture at the I love that. Yeah, I actually saw that one in his office that you took that. I think he might have that hung up in his office because it's such an amazing picture. Yeah, this is his picture from the 2012 National Championship. And I'm going to adjust on the fly here. I got my 2012 championship floor and a little bracket there. And then I got to figure out what to do on the big wall over here. I still don't know what to do yet. But the office is very quickly coming together. But great time to celebrate. Hopefully we can be like here maybe a couple weeks, somewhere like right around here. That'd be great.
Yeah, you know what else is quickly coming together? This NCAA tournament resume that Kentucky's starting to put together now. So it's 3 straight episodes of Happy, Shawn. I saw that comment earlier, that reply, and man, what a weekend that was.
I know it. And how's my audio sounding? It just said I lost connection with the mic. Is the mic still coming through?
I've got you good now. You're actually better than what you were.
All right, cool. Well, if I have any questions or comments about it, let me know if my starts sucking. I'm not sure what the deal was there. But, a major reason to celebrate today, an 86-54 win, a beatdown over the Auburn Tigers, 4 straight wins for the Cats. Shawn, and I just rewatched the game before we got started. It looked even better on camera than being there in person. It obviously looked amazing as it was unfolding live in front of me at Rupp Arena. But watching the replay on the game, the Cats looked absolutely unbelievable. That to close out the first half, they close out on a 9-0 run, looked really good. But we've seen them do that before. We've seen them struggle to open up second halves, and it's always been a Jekyll and Hyde, tale of two halves. For the first time, we saw a complete 40 minutes, and so much to be excited for, Shawn. I know you have plenty of takes, and we have a whole show to get through to talk about how exciting these takes are. But just your thoughts on the fact that Kentucky was able to put together 2 complete halves.
Dominant win. Like, they've had a lot of close games where they had to execute down the stretch, and that's good to see that they can do that in those moments. But I think the biggest thing that I take away from it is it was a complete 40 minutes. As you said, they played a good first half, played a great second half. The energy in the building was good, and just an overall beatdown, something that had been missing from this team. Like, you hadn't had that against a quality opponent or anything. And I mean, I know that, Auburn came in and it wasn't maybe the quad 1 or whatever that we were talking about for weeks and stuff leading up to it, but it ended up being a good win. The way that Kentucky won the game, I mean, you're looking at the way that they shot from the floor, 56%, and the numbers from the 3-point line, the free throw line, they just all over the stat sheet. And then you look, and Kentucky's dude, Oscar Tshiebwe, dominant, 22 and 17. Another consistent approach and game from Jacob Toppin. In a game where Chris Livingston only had 6 and 2, Jacob follows suit and goes 13 and 12 and 5 assists. And you got Antonio Reeves cooking. You got Cason Wallace doing his thing. You got a lot of guys playing well right now. And just to me, the joy that this team is playing with is what's the biggest difference in the last 2 weeks. And I mean, I tweeted out today, 12 days ago, Kentucky was on the bubble. Now they're in the AP top 25 at number 23. I don't know if I ever remember that turnaround whether it be good and then go bad or bad and go to good. I don't remember it in Kentucky. I don't, but I'm sure there have been teams that have done it and played their way in. But I said it on the last episode on Thursday. They were breaking back into the top 25. It took a massive blowout to get there, but look where they sit. And now they're one of the hottest teams in college basketball, probably one of the favorites to win the SEC tournament in Nashville here in a couple of weeks. And, I mean, look at what this team's doing. And here I was 2 weeks ago saying that I didn't know if John Calipari was going to survive this season, or how could he. And here we are again. Every time I go and think, well, maybe it's dying, here he comes. And then here comes Kentucky.
Yeah, and that was obviously a big point of conversation, both in his post-game radio and in his press conference. Denzel Hall made a really funny joke when we first got started. Jack, you cannot talk me out of listening to this podcast. A lot of local media and national media talking Kentucky in or out of the NCAA tournament. And look, 2 weeks ago, this team was not an NCAA tournament team. And I thought we were very fair on this show in addressing that. The resume was what it was. We woke up on that Sunday morning after the loss in Athens, where Kentucky was 1-7 in quad 1 games. They had a quad 4 loss at home against South Carolina. The rest of the schedule was six games left. Of those 6, 4 of them were quad 1 opportunities. Nothing about how the Cats had been playing up to that point in that specific stretch led you to believe that this magic turnaround was gonna happen. And I don't think it's unfair to say that the feelings and the emotions that we had after that loss in Athens, obviously dating back to the South Carolina loss and earlier in the year, but that loss in particular, it just felt, okay, if we're 6 games away from the end of this regular season, why do we just think it's going to magically get put together now? So I get it. John Calipari always performs better when he has an enemy. And we've seen it be Coach K. We've seen it be the national media, the Jeff Goodmans and the Pat Forties and, those types. We've seen it be Rick Pitino. This year, I think it's just going to be the media and the people that have internally kind of hated on him, quote unquote, or whatever. And if that's what it takes to put together a late season magical turnaround and a Final Four run after what we went through 9-16 2 years ago, St. Peter's last year, if that's what it takes to get that reward, this reward, hate me. I love it. Like I can be the chip on your shoulder. I can be the enemy. That's fine. I love this team. What we saw at home against Auburn on Saturday leads me to believe that this team is capable of something like that. And if you need that as bulletin board material or whatever, I'll keep saying what I need to say or whatever it is, because if this is the end result, I'm all for it, because this team is absolutely clicking at the right time.
They are. And I said it, I can't remember if it was after Tennessee or which game it was, but I was talking about that there were 6 games left in the regular season. And to win a national championship, you have to win 6 in a row. So I said, now's the perfect opportunity to kind of go on a run here and show me that you can do it, especially with the quality opponents that were coming up. The quad 1 road game at Florida, the quad 1 game at home against Tennessee, and just everything and kind of in between with what they were doing. So now you've got 4 out of the way, and you've got 2 coming up that we will, I know, get to this week, but they're playing really good basketball. It's one of those things that the committee is going to look at this thing, and we will get into that when we get down to the updated resume section, but the committee is going to look at this, and I'm telling you, what you do in November, it does matter. November basketball does matter when it comes to resume and quad 1s and whatever you're doing out of conference. But this is a team that doesn't have really anything to show for in the non-conference schedule, but it's making up for it in league play, but it's playing really good at the right time. And that's what I think the committee is going to pay attention to, is how is Kentucky trending compared to how these other teams that maybe were playing good basketball in November, in December, that aren't playing good basketball now, but Kentucky is. So the ceiling for me with seeding, I said a 6 the other day. I actually think that it might be changing and possibly pushing into a 5, which we will get to as we move throughout. But the way they're playing basketball, if they continue this surge, keep racking up some quad 1s. I know they got another one coming up here this week, but keep racking up quad 1s, get into that league tournament, get a couple more, go on a winning streak into March, Jack. And I think that you're talking about a team that was looking at being on the first 4 out, last 4 in, possibly playing their way into a 5-12 or a 6-11 in the NCAA tournament.
Well, I mean, if you look at bracket matrix right now, Kentucky is the second 8 seed overall with an average seed of 7.63. Just a game ago, they were, I think, 8.41 or something like that. So they're already trending the right direction. I think the highest seed they have so far is a 6, and that's with 2 more games left. That's with a home matchup against Vandy and the road trip to Fayetteville to close out the regular season. So if you look at just kind of where things are right now, Kentucky's 20 in the net right now. It just came out back in the AP poll for the first time since December 26, I believe. So, like, I don't know how this resume right now, looking at again, and it's just so crazy to think that 2 weeks ago they had no resume, and now they're pushing almost 6 quad 1 games. Michigan's right there on the cusp of being a quad 1. Did they officially jump to quad 1 status yet? Or are they right on the cusp still?
They're not there yet, I don't think. I was looking at Vanderbilt's resume, which I'll get to in a second, and what they're doing. But let me go check that because I'll tell you where they are.
Michigan is 55 right now. Wait, how did they go down after beating?
Well, and that's the thing when it comes to the net. Like, it's very confusing, right? When you look at what it is, Tennessee, with what they've been doing, is still sitting at number 3 in the net. And then you got Michigan, who's doing what they're doing, and they don't move a ton. So, like, I don't know. Like, but that needs to get to 50. If it does, then Kentucky adds another quad 1 win on a neutral site. And Texas A&M at 27, you want that to stay in that top, or in the top 30 there. That way it stays a quad 1 as well. So we were watching a ton of games a year ago, if you remember, going into the SEC tournament, where we were saying, I think it was Vandy last year, where the one in Nashville was kind of creeping on becoming a quad 1. So there's going to be a couple to watch. But even if they don't, let's say the A&M game shifts to a quad 2 and Michigan stays quad 2. What Kentucky's doing right now and how they're playing, I think, is significantly more important than if those wins flip-flop to a 1 or a 2. Because, yeah, it helps your resume and it may bump you a 5 seed or a 6 seed. But I still think not even the overall body of work. I think it's the what are you doing now mentality, because it's what's most recent, right? Like, do you remember every single game that was played in college basketball in November? Some of the big ones, like even some of the big wins, I've forgotten about them. But I remember how teams are playing right now because it's recent and it's fresh. And I think when you go in there, you take these bodies of work, but then again, you also have the eye test and you're seeing what's happening now. And Kentucky has done this run shorthanded. Like, they've not done it without the Cousy Award finalist that they had, that everybody thought was going to kind of lead the charge. It's been Case and Wallace, which has ended up being a successful change and a successful shift. But you've been without CJ Frederick. You've been without other pieces at times. So what Kentucky's doing and how they've done it and regrouped, I think that's going to stand a lot and will help Kentucky when it comes to Selection Sunday, just as much as their body of work is going to help.
Joe Harmon says that you guys realize if Texas A&M loses at Ole Miss, they play Alabama. That would make Kentucky the runner-up in the SEC if we won out the last 2. Amazing shift. I guess it does come down to that. You were talking about Texas A&M potentially being on that quad 1, quad 2 line right there at 27. Part of you wants to root for Texas A&M to continue to win the last 2 games, just so it does stay at the quad 1 line. But on the same note, if they lose these last 2 games, Kentucky is the number 2 seed in Nashville. But there is almost that sense of, it doesn't matter if 5, 6, 7, 2 in Nashville versus 3. At what point do we just say Kentucky is steamrolling these teams right now? We just saw them play their best all-around performance of the year, locked in defensively for the first time, and who knows how long responded to punches getting thrown their way. You know, we've seen that was, one of the biggest talking points after the Georgia game is that the players before the game said, yeah, we know Georgia's going to want to throw that first punch. And we were like, well, why can't Kentucky be the one to throw the first punch? Kentucky threw that first punch against Auburn at home. The back and forth between Janai Broome and Oscar Sheboy was amazing to start with. And then Oscar, Janai was clearly trying to impose his will on Oscar. Oscar would respond right back on the other end of the floor and just kind of kept throwing the haymaker after haymaker after haymaker. And it just felt like this team is capable of being the knockout specialist now. They put together the knockout in the second half against Auburn that we just have not seen them do all season long. The guys that were supposed to be the shot makers and the shot creators are creating and making now. Kaysen has become an unbelievable playmaker and facilitator, and his court vision has improved. I mean, he's just getting so freaking good as a playmaker, as the lead guard now. And the first comment that John Calipari said after the win was the impact that CJ Frederick coming back to play 7 minutes, didn't do anything, didn't even take a single shot, but his impact to just give guys that need breathers a breather. Because there is that slight concern that Kaysen's back spasms flare up again, or Adu Thero is thrown into the starting lineup, or needing to play high level of minutes. Just getting guys healthy and having that top 7. If you can get Xavier and CJ back going into even Nashville, those 7, I'm taking those 7 and throwing them against anybody else in college basketball right now, especially in the SEC. I really, really like what I saw on Saturday against Auburn.
Yeah, given the way they're playing as a team right now, like I said, this was, Chris Livingston had his big games, and then he kind of slides back to 6-2, but still played 23 minutes. And Jacob Toppin, consistent Jacob Toppin. I'm telling you, that is where I think a lot of this success lies, is in his game and his development in league play. This is not the same guy that we were watching play basketball in November and December. Like, he is efficient in everything he's doing. I mean, look at the stat sheet right now. We know Oscar, how he impacts the game. We know he can impact it with some scoring and some garbage buckets and some other things that he's doing, but it's always the rebounding category. Jacob is starting to do some of the stuff that Kaysen does, where he shows up in multiple lines on the stat sheet. You look at this: 13 points, 4 offensive rebounds, 8 defensive rebounds, 12 rebounds total, 5 assists, only 1 turnover, and a steal in 33 minutes. Jacob Toppin. It's just consistent basketball from him for about the last month almost. Even when Kentucky was losing games, I thought Jacob was still doing some things well. But this stretch of him finding his identity, it's taken 3 years, but he's found it. And now you see Antonio Reeves building confidence and being that shot maker that Kentucky needs, that if he hits one, he might hit 4 in a row. And they've got that shot maker, that consistent guy. CJ Frederick coming back, like you said, I thought it was huge. I thought just being able to spell guys for a few minutes here and there, just to add some depth and to get back on the floor. Like, if it's just 6 or 7 minutes a game from him the rest of the way, if that's all he can give you, especially like in games like that, it goes a long way. And I don't know what's going to happen, with Xavier. I don't know where things are going there, but any kind of depth helps at this point. But John Calipari has found his mix. And I don't see him going away from it at any point. Even if Kentucky gets fully healthy, I don't think anything goes away. I don't think John Calipari shifts and changes anything that he's doing lineup-wise and rotation-wise unless his hand is forced to do it with an injury, foul trouble, or something happens in postseason play. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he's found the mix and what works. And how about Oscar Tshiebwe, and the open and the floor spacing, stepping out from the floor? It might, the people that was talking about putting him back at the basket, and they've moved him out on the floor. It's actually opened things up a lot for Kentucky offensively, and you got a lot of guys playing well because of it.
I think those two things have gone hand in hand. Just the way Oscar, not being an anchor, just kind of black hole inside. I think him kind of taking a step back and allowing the space around him to kind of work together a whole lot better. I think that's been huge. But going back to Jacob, he's now hit 11 of his last 20 3-point attempts in SEC play, 7 of his last 10 overall. His ability to just do everything at this point, like, he's had ups and downs bigger than anybody else on this roster, Shawn. And Aaron asked a great question: is Toppin the true leader of this team? They seem to have gone the way that he has gone mentally and physically. I think I couldn't agree more with that. Because we have seen this team play at its worst whenever Jacob is playing at his worst. When he's not locked in on either end of the floor, the team isn't. It just feels like the team does come and go as Jacob comes and goes. And it has been so refreshing. And just rewatching the game today, seeing Jacob be that second chance guy and getting the putbacks and the fighting on the glass and crashing the glass and getting the occasional lob in transition to just kind of set the tone, to shift momentum and do the little things like that. And then just catch and shoot threes at the top of the key. And just when the shots have come to him, taking them and making them, that effort is the difference on this team. I think so. The biggest question we had about this team midway through the year is that nobody at the 4 spot had emerged. Chris Livingston wasn't that guy. He was having the role and position concerns, and Damian wasn't that guy at the 4. Lance obviously wasn't going to be a great fit alongside Oscar. It just felt like it was do or die with Jacob Toppin, and the team was sinking as he was sinking. And it just sucked because you knew he had it in him. We saw him do it in the Bahamas and just random flashes. But for him to put together the stretch, and I want to get the stats right, 12 consecutive double-figure scoring nights, 14 of his last 16. Like, he's and that's not even accounting for what he's doing as a rebounder and what he's doing defensively. He's locking in defensively when he was not earlier in the year. It just does feel like this team will go as far as Jacob Toppin does, especially if he has to maintain this and keep it up. But if Jacob maintains this level of production going into March, all bets are off. I truly believe that.
Yep, I agree. And the thing with Jacob too, the offensive numbers, it's not a ton of shots. Like, it's not like he's out here shooting 15, 16 shots a game and getting these numbers. It's an efficient double-figure scoring effort for 12 straight. And now the rebounding showing up consistently, back-to-back double-doubles. And then you get the assist numbers were climbing for the last game. And he's had some games where he's had high assist numbers. And it's just the impact that he can make in significant games in the SEC in a number of different categories, whether it be steals, rebounds, points, just energy. This is the best version of Jacob Toppin. This is the version that me and you've been talking about on this show for now 3 seasons that we were hoping we would see at some point. This was the version that everybody screaming last year that he should have played more minutes than Keon did, was just the overall ceiling and the potential that Jacob could reach if he had the opportunity to do it. And I think that's why you're seeing him do it now, is because he's had to play. He's had to play a ton, and he's not been playing behind anybody. He's had to play alongside Chris, and I think that's why you're seeing them both emerge and do their thing. And we spent the last 2 episodes talking, just raving about Chris Livingston, and we're probably not going to do it on this one. That's a good thing, because who are we talking about today? Oscar Tshiebwe's dominant effort, Antonio Reeves scorching hot, Jacob Toppin's consistency, Cason Wallace. Just because Chris didn't have the same output that he had the 2 games before, somebody else picked it up in the same area. And that's why I was grouping these guys as pairs just a couple of weeks ago, that it doesn't have to be, this isn't a team where I think it's one guy. Then if one guy doesn't play well, I think Kentucky crumbles. As long as you have consistency in those areas. If you got a shot maker every game and you got one of those 2 in Chris or Jacob that are having a consistent game, Kentucky is going to be fine as long as they defend, make shots, play with energy. Look, this team, this is a team that no one wants to see in their bracket. I don't care if it's a 1 seed, 2 seed. You get matched up with Kentucky in that first weekend. If, let's say, Kentucky slides into a 7 and they're playing a 2, that number 2 seed probably isn't feeling too good about where they're at. And then depending on location and where that game is played at geographically, we know that Kentucky fans are going to fill the building. It's the same thing if Kentucky ends up being as a 5 or a 6. This is a team that honestly, given where they are, if they were a 1 seed, I'd feel good about them, how they're playing right now. If they're a 10 seed, I feel good about where they're playing, how they're playing right now. They're getting hot at the right time. I agree with the graphic. It is the hottest team in the SEC right now. Tell me someone that's hotter. I mean, I know Alabama is right there at the top, but when it comes to how a team was playing weeks ago and how they're playing now, we've also seen that same Alabama team lay a couple of duds. There's no dominant team in college basketball. I firmly believe that there's not that team that you just look at right now and I circle and say that's your national champion. Or if Kentucky gets up against them, I don't think Kentucky can beat them. I know Alabama's been a problem for Kentucky, but I think that there's no dominant team, and if Kentucky just gets in this tournament, plays good basketball, Jack, they've got a chance. It's not like that every season, but it is this season.
I mean, that stat right there from Ben from Kentucky, no one is talking about the fact that only 11 teams in major conferences have eight losses or less. I mean, if there was ever a year for Kentucky to struggle the way it has for half of the year, I mean, almost 3/4 of the year, and just figure things out at the right time and have the guys who were struggling and we're trying to find their roles and who their identities as basketball players, find their footing. Antonio Reeves find his footing as an SEC level basketball player compared to Illinois State. If there was ever a year for a really long adjustment period, and I just go back, Shawn, to those early conversations with John Calipari and tweet video that he put out where he was like, guys, it's going to be a rough start. It's going to be a really slow start to the season. You guys are going to need to be patient. I remember we were like, oh, stop it, Cal. Here he goes again, just being silly, Cal. No, the team was not very good to start the year. Like, admittedly, not very good. And it just felt like they were running out of time. It'd be like the hourglass was flipped over, and you could just see the sand just like almost coming to an end. Where we're like, I don't know if there's enough time left in the season to get this thing figured out. And I think Oscar Sheboy had a quote 2 games ago where he said that, kind of the refuse to lose mentality. They're using a quote from Michael Jordan, who said, I never lost a game. I just ran out of time in all those games. And I think that's the mentality that this team has right now. It's like, all right, throw all of it behind us. Everything that happened earlier, throw Missouri, throw South Carolina, throw Georgia, throw UCLA, Gonzaga, all of those losses and bad performances and lack of effort and intensity and tenacity and all those, put that all behind us. Let's focus on what matters most. And I didn't believe him. I mean, the on paper, there was enough time on paper technically, but for them to just to flip the script the way they have at this point, while everybody else is kind of wavering, kind of plateauing a little bit, and they continue to climb. I mean, I agree. There's nobody else in college basketball that has me thinking, well, that's the one loss that if we got matched up against them in March, that's the one loss. There's just not one team out there right now.
No. And I was looking at Vanderbilt earlier, and I know like it doesn't do anything for your resume, but I think I really like where this game's at. Just because Vandy's playing very well. I know they lost that game at LSU last Wednesday, but other than that, they've won 6 of 7. They've beaten Tennessee. They've swept Florida. They beat a South Carolina team that beat Kentucky at Rupp Arena, and they beat Auburn. And they're playing really good basketball. And they do have 3 quad 1 wins on their resume and 4 and 1 in quad 2. Like, this isn't a game that's going to add to your resume. It's not going to show up on Selection Sunday. But I just look at this thing and I'm like, look, this is the perfect thing that you want. I think you don't want a bad team walking into Rupp Arena where you're just going to beat up on them. You want somebody coming in that's playing good basketball, that's going to give you a challenge, that's forcing you to continue playing your best. And I think this is the perfect opponent coming in here. Kentucky's going to have to play well to beat Vandy again. Vandy's playing much better basketball now than they were the last time, Kentucky played them. And I think it's the perfect game to close the regular season. It's going to be senior night. Got a lot of guys going through festivities. I know we'll get to that and stuff as well, because that doesn't mean anything when it comes to senior night right now. They're just going through it. But I like where this game is, Jack, because you got a road trip to Fayetteville to close the regular season on Saturday. But right now, I don't think Kentucky cares who's walking in the door and playing them. I don't think they care if it's Vandy or if it's Duke. The mindset that they're playing with right now is what we have done in this locker room over the course of the last 14 days has shifted whatever we were doing prior to this. And if that's John Calipari or if that's player-led or if that's the entire program-led, I don't know. I don't know what the mix is and what the secret sauce is that they're doing right now. But whatever it is, it's working. Don't mix it. Don't mess it up. Keep doing it. And, I mean, look at the fan base right now. Like, you wouldn't even know that this team struggled for 3 months with the vibe around the fan base right now and on Twitter. And it's Kentucky basketball. Every time that we get sucked into thinking, man, it's it, this is it, it's not, they're not going to make a run, they're not going to have a shot. And we had every right to believe that 2 weeks ago. And then Kentucky comes out of nowhere. John Calipari gets his team right. And I see a lot of dudes right now having fun and a lot of smiles on the floor. And I think that's the biggest shift in energy is the smiles, and the guys are having fun. Oscar Sheboy isn't kind of complaining or doing anything anymore. He's back to playing basketball and just letting it be. Whatever he's done, he's changed his approach to it too, because he's the leader of this thing. And his positivity on the floor last year was one of the biggest things for this team. And I feel like he's found himself too. I think a lot of these guys really lost who they were. Cal lost who he was. I think the guys lost who they were. You had guys trying to figure out who they were. They didn't even know. Identities have been formed and developed. And I think that this team has found something in the mix the last 2 weeks that's going to continue pushing into tournament play. But you want to see it continue Wednesday night against Vandy.
Kevin Hall says, it seems like that since Tyler Eulis joined the bench, things have begun to trend upward. I kind of think that there's something to that, or at least some. And Kentucky made 15. How much impact has Euless had? So he was announced after the Missouri loss. It was to close out the 2020, I guess, in December, I guess, kind of transitioning into SEC play. It was right after the Missouri loss. I think that's where the conversation started. And it does feel like since then, and I guess that is a pretty significant sample size, but I don't know. It just seems like since John Calipari brought up that Tyler kind of helped from the bench with the mismatch with Chris Livingston against Mississippi State, it just does feel like the vibe has been a lot different with him kind of anchoring a lot of things. I was down there on the floor before, pregame during pregame shoot around, and Tyler was super vocal and kind of directing traffic a little bit. And it just does feel like he's been a really solid energy and presence on that bench, and something that I definitely think has helped. I don't know if it's maybe just took some time for him to find his footing on the staff through just being around the program and, not wanting to start too early, having too loud of a voice. But it does feel like once he kind of found his groove as a little, student assistant on the bench, it feels like the team has kind of rallied around him and with him. And, maybe I'm just overthinking it, but as a couple comments brought it up, I do think that there is something to that. But
do you think it's helped? Do you think his addition has helped the players more? Or do you think it's helped Cal more? Or is it hand in hand? Because Cal has probably shifted a lot of the attention during games and in games and stuff to those conversations on the bench now when guys walk off, which guys don't come out of games much right now. I know, except unless it's a timeout, but that you see Tyler in Cason's ear often, talking to him on the bench or during timeouts. And I feel like that a guy that's been through the fire with John Calipari at Kentucky and has been to a Final Four and knows what it takes to get to that game as a player, he's the only dude on that bench that knows that. No one else knows what it takes. No one on that coaching staff. I mean, obviously they know as coaches, but when it comes to players and things at Kentucky, like they don't know. But Tyler has lived it. He knows exactly the pressure that Cason Wallace is under. He knows the same pressure that Antonio Reeves is under. He's felt it. He's lived it. And I feel like those guys can feel that from him. And I feel like that's been one of the biggest additions to what they're doing. And this year is Tyler Ulis's impact on the team and just his positivity and maybe pointing guys in the right direction and saying, look, and the biggest thing is it's going to be okay. You're going to get it figured out. You're going to get it right. And just having that voice on the bench, I think that's been a big deal.
To the level that he trusts Tyler. I think Tyler was the one guy, the guy that he leaned on more than, I guess, just like in terms of an on-court coach and as a leader. I don't know if Cal has had a player that he trusted more to just say, all right, you can make these calls, you can make these decisions. I feel like he wants to be a little over involved with guys that he doesn't trust as much or haven't come along as far. Tyler, he had ultimate trust in. And I think that has translated to the bench. I think Cal knowing that if Tyler sees something, he trusts that instinct. If Tyler has a change of heart or, this isn't working, we need to go this direction or whatever the case is, I think that there's something to that trust. And if Tyler speaks up and says, hey, I think we need to do this, I don't think there's anybody on the roster that if he had that same input that Cal would go, gotcha, let's make this happen. And there's a lot of value in that. And that's why I trusted that move so much whenever it happened, because that leadership and that he was an on-court coach during his time at Kentucky. And Cal, I don't think has ever raved about a kid more than he raved about Tyler Ulis, because he knew he was the floor general. He knew that he was the guy that was capable of, running the show while he's kind of putting his efforts elsewhere, grooming the bench, figuring out timeouts, drawing up future plays, looking at the defense, whatever. He knew that he had a coach that was there seeing things unfold with his own two eyes on the floor. It's so much different than being on the sideline versus on the floor. And Tyler has done both under John Calipari. And I think that value is absolutely huge. And I can't remember who John P. Ryan says, I bet Ulis has helped Kaysen a ton. I don't think that's a coincidence either. Kaysen has emerged as an unbelievable playmaker down the stretch. His court vision, I think he had 9 assists. Again, his assist numbers are just unbelievable. Turnovers are still high, but the way he plays results in turnovers, I think, because he does kind of have a very aggressive kind of creating for himself while also creating for others. I think that does lead to turnovers at times. And we do see him a tad bit reckless, but it's a comfortable reckless because that the reward is going to be so much greater than the risk more often than not. So I do think that Ulis has helped Kaysen quite a bit, and I do think that there's a lot of truth to that. So I'm very grateful that Tyler Ulis is on this staff right now and on this bench, because without him, maybe things would have turned around the way they did, but I'd like to think that there's at least some level of something to it. Let's go to some of these comments here. Connor Riggs says Ulis and Rondo will help Dillingham and DJ next year so much. I completely agree. I think that those two together are going to be excellent, and I'm really excited to see those possibilities. And just watching Rob play to close out his overtime career. He's been so good. It's so much better than I saw him to start with. He really has developed and just matured. There's so much maturity to do that he needed. So I'm feeling a lot better about that possibility. I do think that Ulis will have an impact on that as well. And I guess there were a couple comments about, the Xavier impact. I know we've been talking about Kaysen and Tyler Ulis and the impact on that, but the other dynamic of that, Sean, how do you think that's going to go? Assuming that Xavier is able to give it a go, say going into SEC tournament, how do you expect that dynamic to shift? Do you think that he's going to be a 10, 15-minute guy? Do you think he plays at all? How much do you think he plays, and how crucial is it that he plays?
As needed is what I will go with, because I made the comment earlier that I don't think John Calipari is going to change a thing. I don't. Because if you start messing with things, you might not get it back. So I would say as needed, spot minutes here and there. If there's foul trouble at one of the guard spots, and I think Xavier would play. If there needs to be, somebody needs a breather, if Kaysen needs a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe you're getting close to that media timeout and there's a dead ball and you want to get that extended break of maybe 35 seconds and whatever, and then the media timeout as well, then I could see, Xavier playing some minutes there. But I don't think the role is going to be significant. But I think it could be if Xavier buys into whatever that role is. So I'm not diminishing what the role could be. If it's 5 to 7 or 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes a game, then go be the best guard off the bench in college basketball that plays 9 or 10 minutes a game. Like, I think that how he accepts whatever that role is for him is going to be the determining factor in whether or not this works for Kentucky or whether or not it doesn't work for Kentucky. But I don't see Kaysen Wallace coming off the floor very much. I don't see Antonio Reeves coming off the floor very much. I don't see any of these dudes that have been playing basketball for the last 2 to 3 weeks coming off the floor at all. CJ's role is another one to watch too. I don't think that that's going to get back to what it was early in the season. I don't think he's going to be climbing 20, 25 minutes or anything like that. I think you'll see some games where he'll sneak into double figures depending on foul trouble, because we know it happens. Right now, Kentucky's been avoiding that in this recent stretch. That's another note. I know Jacob Toppin, obviously, the other day fouled out, but when it comes to what they're doing, they've been able to stay out of foul trouble. And that's been another plus, is because they've not had to kind of dive too far into that. But Adu Thiero is getting minutes and stuff there. So I think a thing to watch is it Xavier or is it Adu? I don't know. Like I think it all depends on how roles are accepted and who accepts that small role best. I hope it's Xavier, because I do think he can help Kentucky in spots. But if not, I don't think Cal's going to mess with it and kind of put all of his eggs in a basket and just kind of force it, because you don't want to force anything this time of year. If it doesn't fit, don't try to throw it in there. If it fits and it helps you, do it. But somebody asked me about KenPom and wanted me to touch on Kentucky's number when it comes to offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. This was a text message. That defensive efficiency right now, Jack, is at 78th. I'm not sure what it's been in the recent stretch of play, but Kentucky's offensive efficiency is 13th and 22 overall in KenPom. My note is this. Look at a team like Tennessee, who is first in defensive efficiency, and I think they're 62nd in offensive efficiency. I would rather be Kentucky's numbers than Tennessee's numbers. And here's why. Tennessee's going to struggle to score points when you get in that NCAA tournament. So I think Kentucky's efficiency offensively, we know that scoring points wins you basketball games in March. Guard play wins you basketball games in March. I'd rather have the more efficient offensive team than the more efficient defensive team, in my opinion, especially when you get into tournament format where guards take over and the game it does slow down at points in postseason play. So I think the more efficient offensive team, honestly, I think it wins out, especially when you get to that part of the season.
And it's such a will to want to with defense that I feel like this team, and I've thought this from the beginning, that it's never been a physical inability to play defense. Like Jacob Toppin has never not been able to be a 6'10", long wingspan, highly athletic guy. Like that should on paper translate to being an elite defender, or at least a high level defender. And that's been I guess one of the biggest frustrations that I had earlier in the year is because it just felt like engagement. It just felt like defensive lapses, getting beat back door, things, elementary grade mistakes that you like that are so easily cleaned up. They just continue to be made over and over again. And that's why it never made any sense to me. And I always just kind of bet on that. And that's why I was so concerned earlier in the year that if it was an offensive issue where it's just broken, at that point, how do you fix it? How do you fix it if the rotations are wrong? Or how do you fix it if shot makers just don't make shots and, shoot yourselves out of the NCAA tournament? Like we've seen so many teams, Alabama has done it every single year for who knows how long under NATO. It's like, what happens when that becomes the case? Your offense isn't firing on all cylinders. And that was my biggest frustration. Defense that is an effort thing. Chris Livingston struggling defensively earlier and seeing his growth, I think, is because of him being comfortable in his role and understanding who he is as a basketball player and saying, all right, I got this. I can fill this role and do it to the best of my ability. And I think if everybody does that, and John P. Ryan says, I don't think that Reeves, Frederick, and Wheeler are good defenders. I think Wheeler's a good 94-foot defender. I don't think he's a good half-court defender. Antonio Reeves, I think, has gotten a lot better. And I think C.J. Frederick is a high-level effort defender. I think he's kind of more of a fundamental, like, kind of quickness defender. Like that's where his struggles come from. But I think he at least tries, and I think the effort's there. But there's so many other physical tools around those guys that should be able to compensate for that. And I think that's what I liked so much about that Auburn game is the defensive lapses were made up by other people doing their job on the back end or on the help side, whatever the case is. I think that's this team's growth. If you can continue to be pretty dang solid offensively and just good enough defensively, this team can beat every team in the way that they did, because they have so many tools and because they have all the pieces necessary to do that. So I think I 100% agree. I think it's often, if this team is firing on all cylinders offensively, defense, I'll take what I can get in the NCAA tournament and trust their ability to figure things out.
Yeah, and I really like to another factor going back from last season's tournament to this season's tournament and just the roster makeover in general. I like that Kentucky has a perimeter defender like Cason Wallace on its roster that can lock up and guard the opposing team's best perimeter player. Xavier was in that role some last year, like they tried to do, and I know they would run Jacob Toppin on some perimeter players as well. So I feel like the overall mix of what Kentucky wants to do, like maybe the defensive efficiency numbers aren't what you'd love to see them, but I think that they've got dudes in different spots. You've got Toppin who can guard long wings, and you've got Chris Livingston that has some size and can do some things, but you've got that on-ball defender and that perimeter defender in Cason Wallace, that two-way guy that can kind of lock up the opposing team's best player. I really, truly don't think Kentucky had that a year ago. I know Tata Washington was in the mix there. You had Davion Mintz, Kellen Grady, Xavier, but I just feel like they didn't have that bulldog defensive mindset that a Cason Wallace has, where he can shift the game in a couple of plays here and there with his defensive energy. And I think Kentucky has that, and I think that's a big thing when you get in postseason, because guards kind of dictate the game in March. And you need something to negate that. And Kentucky's got it in Kaysen, and they've got the long, lengthy four-man in Jacob Toppin that can do some things, and they've got the rebounder in Oscar Tshiebwe. And I know he's getting better in pick and roll and ball screen coverage, but there's still a lot of room there for improvement. And Kentucky, I'm sure, will come up with some game plans and stuff, and how they're going to defend ball screens depending on game by game and scouting report. But I just think that this team has the makeup to be better defensively in postseason play, even though the KenPom numbers don't show it, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I like that Miles' voice. Livingston is becoming the garbage man, cleanup specialist. I agree, man. Him and Jacob, they were both phenomenal cleanup specialists in that win. And you bring up the defensive. Was the breakaway dunk with Livingston? Was that Florida or was that Auburn?
Auburn, the second half, right?
I'm pretty sure it was. So it was so Kaysen got the kind of free safety across the middle, got the pick, and then threw it up ahead to Livingston. I think that was I think that was
second half. It was second half. It was in the midst of that big run that they had. I think it was after one of Reeves made threes, I believe, because the roof of Rupp Arena almost blew off when he did that. So and the pass was unreal.
What you're talking about. Like that play is what you're talking about. That's an NCAA tournament play that changes the trajectory of a game. Like that is you kill the momentum on one end and then you flip it completely for a breakaway punch. And Chris Livingston gets hyped. The whole eruption zone goes crazy. And I just think, like, say Kentucky gets placed in Louisville, say they're in Columbus, or one of those favorite, or even if they get to Houston, if they get to the Final Four, whatever, Kentucky fans are going to will this team across the finish line wherever they go. So if you get those game-changing plays by the game-changing talents on this team, like Kaysen Wallace is, I think that's a difference. And that is a tone setter, a momentum shifter. And I agree. I think Kaysen Wallace, the tournament will come down to if Kaysen Wallace can continue to make plays like that and continue to just make shots at the way that he did. It's very, very exciting. And I don't know, 2 games left in the regular season, and
it's hard to believe we're here at this point.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to believe that there's only 2 games left in this regular season, but man, the overall mood and the feeling is just significantly better than what it was just 2 weeks ago. And I know people that listen to this show, they love us when we're praising. They probably want to tune out when we're criticizing, but like, I don't think anyone wants to see this team play well more than we do, Jack. Like, we don't want to come on here and give the, oh goodness, Kentucky's on the bubble or Kentucky's going to miss the tournament again and all this stuff. We want to be talking the way we're talking right now. And I give John Calipari a ton of credit for the turnaround. I think you got to give the players even more credit for the turnaround, because that's who has the hardest job. And I think that this team is, something happened, something sparked after that game against Georgia and closing out Mississippi State the way they did on the road, getting a quad 1 win in a bubble matchup. Both those teams are right there on the bubble, and then following it with the win against Tennessee and then what they did at Florida and now Auburn. This team is playing with a lot of juice right now and a lot of energy, and it's got energy from the head man all the way down to the last guy on the end of the bench, and I think that's the biggest difference.
Let's talk a little bit about senior night. We got an update from UK where all 6 seniors will go through senior day festivities. So we'll get Oscar Tshiebwe, Xavier Wheeler, Jacob Toppin, Brennan Canada, CJ Frederick, and Antonio Reeves. All 6 will go through their senior day festivities. And I like that move. I think the only time we've ever seen a Kentucky basketball player walk twice at senior day was Davion Mintz. Last year was the first. And I think because of why not give these kids their flowers now? Like, why can't Jacob Toppin, no matter what his decision is, I still expect him to go, but why can't that kid get his flowers for the turnaround and the season breakthrough that he had? Like, that's an amazing moment that he deserves. In particular, Jacob deserves. Antonio Reeves, the guy who came from Illinois State, found his footing, emerged as Kentucky's ultimate green light scorer. I'm going to go take a game over with my shot creation and shot abilities at all 3 levels. That guy deserves his flowers. Xavier Wheeler, a lot of hell he's been through last year, this year, the ups and downs. I want that guy to be able to walk through that paper cylinder, that's that paper ring or whatever. I want him to walk through that and get a standing ovation from the Rupp Arena crowd, because I know that fans will celebrate Xavier Wheeler and what he brought to the table in his 2 years at Kentucky. I don't think he comes back next year, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve that moment and the opportunity. If he by some chance does decide to come back, get it next year too. If any of those guys, CJ Frederick is a really tough decision to make. It would not shock me at all if he said, you know what, my body isn't continuing to let me play the game that I love at the level that I have been accustomed to since he was first picked up a basketball. Like, I understand he has a tough decision to make, and I personally, I think when push comes to shove, he'll end up coming back, but he deserves the right now to get the flowers that he deserves for fighting through the injuries that he has and playing the role that he has as the veteran. And I am looking forward to all 6 of those guys getting their flowers that they very, very clearly deserve.
I agree with you. They all have the right to go through that and to be celebrated. And whether they come back, they can go through it again. The same way we saw Davion Mintz, do his thing. I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see those guys get honored and recognized, and the ovations. They've all given a lot to this university and to this program. One question I have for you, though, cracking back into the top 25, breaking back into that, and I know it's low. It's at 23 in the AP. Any concern about a team that maybe found a chip on its shoulder, being out of the top 25 for so long, playing its way back in at all? I really don't think anyone on this roster is going to look and say, wow, 23 right there beside our name, man, we're really doing something. But anything at all? Because I think a lot of fans would probably tell you that, honestly, they were fine being out of the top 25 given the way Kentucky was playing. So don't push them back into that top 20, top 15 right now. But the AP poll doesn't matter. What matters more is where Kentucky's at when it comes to resume and quad 1 wins and things like that. But any concern at all about maybe getting a little bit of recognition for what they've been doing and some positive praise? I know some people picking on to win the SEC tournament and things like that. Like, anything about maybe the poison that John Calipari and some of these coaches talk about creeping back in when you got a team that's playing so well, kind of flying under the radar, and now they're not?
It is. I mean, this team has listened to the noise on occasion this year, and why should we just assume that they won't fall back into that? And I do think that something has to give. Like, I do think that I want to believe that at this point they saw them fall back. They saw them fall back into the trap of that stuff. And, they went on their 4-game winning streak, lost against Kansas. And then they won 6 straight in the SEC and then lost back-to-back against Arkansas and Georgia. I'd like to think that those slip-ups are done, that they do understand that, all right, who cares what we're ranked? Who cares what we are in the net, or what the seeding is, or what the what we're going to be in the SEC tournament, whatever that is. I feel like when push comes to shove, this is a team that at this point in the year, once this refuse to lose mentality kind of kicked in and the mantra came about, like, it feels like ever since then is when they have actually bought into that. So I'd like to think not, but the proof isn't necessarily there to, kind of prove otherwise. So I guess we are in wait and see mode with that, but it is something to definitely keep in mind. But I'd like to think, and I'm going to choose to believe, I'm going to talk us into this, that they are going to do this. I'm going to speak it into existence, because I think that's clearly a John Calipari mantra going in right now. We talk them into and out of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and they're definitely they've played their way safely in, I believe. Like, I don't see any scenario where this team isn't in the NCAA tournament, and they got a game against Vandy on Wednesday night, then a road trip to Fayetteville, then you're in the SEC tournament in Nashville, and it's going to be officially March here in just a couple of days. So when it talks to seeding and resume and where Kentucky's going to be, have your thoughts changed at all on a ceiling for what they could be? I know you and I just a few days ago said probably a 6 seed is probably, or 7, probably most likely, depending on how they play out. But I'm changing my mind a little bit, Jack. I'm starting to shift it and say a 5 is where I'd put the ceiling. I don't think they can go higher than a 5. There'd have to be a lot to kind of go crazy, and some teams kind of, but here's the other thing I'll say. If you can climb as much as they have in recent weeks, in 12 days and change the overall perception of the voters' minds, what does the committee do when it comes down to it if Kentucky's got a plus 500 quad one resume compared to some of these other teams and they're playing good basketball at the right time? What all factors go into this decision and where Kentucky's at? Now, we're obviously talking about a team that needs to win the last two and probably get to the SEC championship game and stuff. We know that Sunday doesn't matter in the SEC tournament unless you're playing your way into the tournament off the bubble or as an automatic qualifier. But has anything changed in your mind on that ceiling and where Kentucky's at? Like right now, I know Joe Lenardi has them as an 8. I think that's pretty safe. I believe it's an 8. Yeah, they got them as an 8 versus Boise State in Columbus in the New York region. But I would say right now I probably have them at about a 7 or an 8. Probably an 8's the safest pick at the moment.
And I agree. And I choose to believe that the committee will ignore the South Carolina game, or at least not weigh that as heavily as they, probably could. Something tells me, I mean, look, Indiana right now, I think in one of Lunardi's recent updates, they were a 4 seed. And I don't think the resumes are that far off from Kentucky's, in terms of losses and quality wins and so forth. And I think when push comes to shove, I think that there's going to be a pretty substantial jump, one way or the other. That some guys that are ranked a little too high right now, probably going to tank a little bit. So part of me thinks that if Kentucky takes care of business against Vandy at home, goes to Arkansas and wins that game, I don't even think they need to, win the SEC championship, but at least get to the final game. I think if they do that, am I crazy to think that Kentucky can't get to a 4? Just, I mean, because at that point they would have won 8 straight games. Unless, say they win it all. Say they win the SEC championship. That's 9 straight wins, I believe. 6 and then 3. Yeah, 9 straight wins. You don't think that's a 4 seed? Considering the quad ones to close out the regular season? I don't know.
I know. I'm telling you, like, I'm eating a lot of crow here because, and I'm glad I am. And that's the thing that I want people to realize is I love the fact that I was wrong. I love it because I thought this team was left for dead. I did after the Georgia game. And this is a moment here where I want to say that, I'm sorry. Because I really didn't think that this would happen, Jack. I didn't. I didn't think that they could get back on track. I thought that there was just too much piling up. I thought that the thin numbers, putting a lot on some freshmen that really hadn't, been playing well, and then Kaysen comes out of nowhere and starts taking over, and you got Chris who's building confidence every game, and Jacob Toppin finding his groove and rhythm. You had Oscar Sheboy who looked like a shell of himself for a while this season, who just did not look like the same dude that we watched having fun playing the game of basketball a year ago. These guys were not having fun. They were emotionally beaten down. The fans were emotionally beaten down. Everybody was frustrated. We were frustrated. I'm so glad I was wrong. I'm so glad that whatever I tweeted after the Georgia game ended up being the biggest line of BS that I'd ever probably spewed on Twitter in my 6 years of being on the app. I'm glad I'm wrong. And I'm just to the point now that I don't care if this team's a 4. I don't care if they're a 5. I don't care if they're a 9. I don't care if they're a 10. If they keep smiling the way they've been smiling the last 2 weeks, I think NCAA tournament time is going to be a lot of fun.
I agree, man. And it is a very refreshing thing to see a group of dudes that have gone through so much. And I talked about this on the last show. There was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that could have really tanked the season. And it kind of made me take a step back after that Missouri loss and go, all right, this is deeper than basketball. There's other stuff going on. We need to reel it in and understand that, my concern was, okay, sometimes it just tanks the season and it is what it is. And it made me feel like it made me still feel bad for them and feel worse for it. But that doesn't mean that a magic turnaround was going to happen just because the games were there. I just thought because of how things were going, things that were going on behind the scenes leading up to a really tough finish of the season, it just didn't make sense. It just didn't add up. And for them to turn around the way they did, and the guys having the breakthroughs that they did, Oscar Sheboy getting the validation after starting out the year with the minor injury and the minor knee surgery that ended up being a significant one that took him way longer to heal than it should have. And Jacob Toppin hitting the rock bottom that he said that he had. And just everybody, Damian Collins going through what we went through, or what he went through. This team had so many people fight back from a lot of different things that to see this turnaround and kind of get the reward. I hope that the end of season reward is, much more significant and they get that finish that they deserve. But even just to get to this point where we're back talking about them as a realistic, maybe not Final Four contender, but a team capable of making a run, it's really refreshing. I'm definitely excited for it and can't wait to see where the next couple of weeks unfold for the Cats. We got to get the heck out of here. The Coach Cal show is about to start, and
work to
I
do.
know a bunch of fans are going to be listening to that. So let's get out of here. I have a quick message a couple quick messages actually from our friends at Sumner County Tourism. Kentucky fans, we know you'll be making your way to Nashville for the SEC tournament. We say welcome back. Experience beautiful Sumner County, Tennessee, just minutes from Nashville. Discover our storied history and strong country music heritage. Indulge in our delicious dining options. Relax in the simplicity of our lakes, parks, and farms. Connect with the authenticity of Sumner County, Tennessee. Head to visitsumnertn.com to learn more. Shawn, let's get the heck out of here. Where can fans find your work?
You can find my work at gobigbluecountry.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GBBCountry.
Find me on Twitter as well, at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Reach out to me via email, jpilgrim@KentuckySportsRadio.com. With that, we'll be back Thursday. We'll do the same time, same place, 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, hopefully after another win, after a senior day victory over the Vanderbilt Commodores. It's great talking about 4 straight wins, but how about 5? I'm looking forward to it. We will see you then.